Okay. Jan Phillips, it's just great to have you with us today. We at Quest Books are so proud to be the publishers of your first book, Marry Your Muse, Making a Lasting Commitment to Your Creativity. And I want to tell you that the New Age Journal has listed Marry Your Muse as one of the best of the bunch of new books to inspire, intrigue, and instruct. Isn't that great?
That's very great.
And so let's start by asking how you got the idea for this book. Where did the idea from this great book come from?
Well, the idea grew out of a dilemma I ran into when I was teaching a class in Skidmore College at the annual International Women's Writing Guild Conference. And I was fully prepared. We were going to be together. I was teaching this class for 6 days, and what happened is the women all come into the writing class, and what they're doing is all talking about why they're not writing. They all have these obstacles. Don't have enough time, don't have enough space. My husband doesn't get it. My kids don't leave me alone. And then the deeper, more honest ones, I don't have any confidence in my work. I don't believe I have any experiences worth sharing. And so we had to take some days to deal with what are these obstacles about and what can we do to reframe them. And we really worked through that. We wrote a lot in the class. We dealt with those issues, and out of that surfaced the Artist Creed, which was a creed that I wrote basically for myself and these women that took the class so that we wouldn't forget what we had arrived at by the end of the week. And the creed is like, I believe I'm worth the time it takes to create whatever I feel called to create. I believe my work is worthy of its own space. I believe I have a right to work in silence, uninterrupted, for as long as I choose, and on and on, addressing every one of those issues that we brought to the week. And after I had written that Artist Creed, all of a sudden I felt like, whoops, I hadn't said enough. I had a ton more of things to say on each of those subjects: time, space, our belief in ourselves, the reasons for why we're writing, the power of our words. So then it became obvious to me that I wanted to expand it and write a book, because it was true. If it's true for me and those 15 women in my first class, it's true for women and men all over the world, I'm sure, that we lack confidence. No, who's got time that you know of? When do you ever hear someone say, I have time?
Never.
So I'm basically, so the book came out of that experience of learning firsthand from people who are trying to get to the creative work, all the reasons why they weren't able to get there.
And why the title? Why Marry Your Muse? What is a muse?
Well, a muse is, in my perception, the muse is that creative spirit. I remember seeing when I was young a painting of an artist at work, a writer busy hovering over his journal or manuscript, and right standing beside the shoulder of the artist was this kind of angelic character. I don't remember if she had wings or not, but it was definitely a woman, and it was definitely the artist's cheerleader, definitely the creative giver of the creative spirit, as it were. And so that was the image. I didn't conjure up. I don't feel one bit responsible for the concept Marry Your Muse. It like occurred to me, like, you know, when you wake up from a dream and you hear this little voice and it's like this little line, Marry Your Muse. That's how that came, and it came right before I was going to be teaching this workshop. So I think that's what the muse does. I think the muse throws out the seed that we get to plant and nourish and water and work with. And much like I got Marry Your Muse, a musician might get a certain chord or a sequence of a chord or the haunting melody with which the musician can work and expand on and add her or his own feel to and spirit to. But the muse, I think, gives us that first little piece. You know, the title of the book, or the line in the poem, or whatever it is, where the certain movement in a dance. That's the muse. That's the gift of the muse. And it's really up to us to collaborate then with that creative spirit so that we make of that gift the best we can make of it, the most universal contributive piece that we can make of that.
So the muse inspires, turns the light bulb on.
Yes, I think so.
Yes. Now, how do we begin to develop a relationship with this muse, this creative aspect of ourselves?
I think the medium of our relationship with the muse is time. And so
There's that word again.
There's that word again. The reason for the commitment is the same as the reason for commitment in any relationship with any human being we have on the planet. If we want that relationship to thrive and grow and become new and enhance our lives and the lives of the other, then we must make a commitment to that. It doesn't happen by default. You must make time for the other. You must make space to meet and to have your intimacies. And it's the same with our muse. The muse is within us, and all we can bring to the relationship is our time and our openness and our commitment. And it's out of those elements that the fire grows and gets started, and the work takes on a life of its own, and it begins to surface. But if we're not there saying, I give this time to the piece, I give my openness to the piece, and I give my firm commitment to this work, then it will not live. You might as well have a baby and put it in a trash can. It can't grow, it can't be nourished without that commitment from us.
But here's the question. Say that I'm a single parent with 3 kids and a full-time job, and when I get home at 6 o'clock I have to cook dinner, and then I have to help the 3 kids with their homework, and then I have a freelance typing job to make extra money, and I go to bed at midnight and I get up at 6 and go back to work. Where does someone like me find the time?
Well, see, I don't think that creativity always leads to a product. I'm not really talking about the generation of a novel exclusively, or the generation of a certain thing that is important. I think sometimes, because of the circumstances of our lives, it helps for us to perceive of our lives as a creative process. So you come home at 6 o'clock and there are your kids. You get to create the space for them to be in. You get to create the manifestation of dinner as a process in which you and your kids do something exciting together. You know, you get to create, days where they maybe get to orchestrate the event or something. Or you might want to be their mentor in their own creative process. Let them help them understand the importance of giving time, quiet time, to their own inner lives. And say, okay, kids, we're going to, from 7 to 8, we're going to create together. We're going to have an hour of silence. You get to use your crayons, or you get to, write your little science fiction story, and Mom's going to work on her poem or her screenplay. And you make a commitment to the kids so that they understand it's very important for them to claim time for a quiet life, for an internal work of their own, which is as much play as it is work. I mean, it's not work, we call it work, but it's really an act of playfulness and joyfulness. So I think it's reframing our lives, especially for single moms, because it's a very big challenge for you to carve out any chunk of time for yourself. But also maybe to figure out how to minimize your life so that you end up with more time. Cancel cable TV. free up some dollars so maybe you can work less hours in the week and have a little chunk of time on your own. See, I think the challenge to create new circumstances for your life is every big as a challenge to sit down and write a poem. To create a life in which you have more time to write is a bigger creative challenge than the writing.
That's an excellent point. Two things that you've said especially strike me. One is that creativity could be made a family activity, like other family activities, which would certainly be doable. And the other thing which really intrigues me is that I think your concept of creativity goes beyond what we traditionally think of as the arts. You're not just talking about writing and photography and painting, are you?
No, I'm not. I think initially, when I prepared the Marry Your Muse class, I was initially focusing on women writers. But in the course of doing this book, it occurs to me that whether or not someone even calls herself or himself creative doesn't matter, because we're on a much bigger level creating our lives. I'm creating my life from the moment I wake up in the day. I'm creating environments in which people enter and experience me. I'm creating at my workplace, whether I have this teeny tiny cubicle or a big office, I'm creating a space there, a kind of psychic space in which people come and feel a certain way. I'm creating whether people have the experience of me as someone with open arms or someone with my back to them. You know, in an elevator, I'm creating a certain, an environment in which people can speak to each other or not. So I think for us to realize that we're not victims of our lives, we're the inventors of our lives, and we're responsible. If I hear somebody saying, oh, my life is terrible, I don't have any control over it, everything's unmanageable, I think of them like, but you're the one that's responsible for how your life looks. You're creating it. Does that mean you're just taking a bunch of colors and throwing them on a canvas and not really giving any thought to how you're designing the piece? Your life is the piece you're working on. Take some time. Design it in the way you want. Figure out what brings you the most joy and get there. Go there. And let that be where you work from, where you cry from, where you live from, where you have your family from. If somebody hates winter, what are they doing in upstate New York? Get thyself to Florida or Key West or San Diego. Consider what elements you need to be happy in the basic foundation of your life. And once you've got those elements around you, there'll be such joyfulness, such an abundance of ways you want to more fully express. And then you can do your creative other work.
In the introduction to your book, you say you begin with the assumption that everyone is inherently creative. But what about, do you really mean that? What about someone like an accountant, or nothing against accountants or automobile mechanics, but what about the tuna fisherman? Does anything that you say in your book, would anything in your book speak to someone like that?
I don't think
real world people.
I think this book speaks to every person that's breathing air on the planet. This book should be in 72 different languages because it goes way beyond American culture. It's about us being born into the world in order to keep creating this universe. I think the universe is created. God created it to a certain extent. Now we're here. He or she peopled it with us, and we get to keep creating it.
Yeah.
We get to keep adding to it. And so whether or not I'm creating a poem or just creating, a wonderful family environment, or creating a quilt, or creating the perfect chicken gumbo, it's all relative. The fact is, yes, I'm here to create, and whatever I create has its own life. There's nobody here that can put something out into the world in the same way that I do. There's nobody else that can express what's happened to me in the same way that I do. And the same is true for you, and the same is true for the tuna fisherman. He goes out there in the ocean, he has his experience, and he comes back, and he's going to translate that experience into something. It might be a tender conversation with his 8-year-old daughter. It might be he goes into a solitary room and writes in his journal about the lashing waves and how his hands feel as he reels it in or whatever. It might be that it comes out in his lovemaking, or it might be that it comes out in some other form. It's like everybody is going to express what their life feels like. Every one of us expresses that, and some of us express it in anger and rage and fury. But that's how we're creating. That's how we're expressing the inner world that we experience. So my book is just encouraging people to really come at it with this concept, to really be accountable for our lives in such a way that what we have to express about our lives is not angry and not like we're victims, but that we experience our lives as something that we ourselves are designing.
And if I were that tuna fisherman and I said, but why do I need a muse? I'm not going to be a famous artist, so why bother?
It's not that any of us need a muse, any more than any of us need a priest or a minister or any intermediary. I mean, the concept of the muse, I like it because it feels like an internal collaborator. It feels like I'm not alone, and as I, in my longing, reach for the divine, reach for that light, reach for that great passion that I want to participate in, that divine energy, that light, that great passion is also reaching and longing for me. So it feels mutual, and it helps me to be in touch with that, to be, before I sit with anyone, before I do a workshop, I sit very quietly and I open myself up to be the vehicle for this greater wisdom to pass through. Because I don't want me, Jan Phillips, to get in the way. I don't want my ego, my selfishness, my concerns about silly things to get in the way. I don't want to care about what I look like. I don't want to be concerned about bags under my eyes or wrinkles where they never were before. I want to let something much bigger and more real